was much more hostile than my environment because I wasn't all alone and I didn't have all the forces of evil against me. But it was another moment where he found himself alone, and in that moment, he needed to look internally and find his own sense of truth, figure out which way to go forward, and being able to rely on his self and his sense of center. Hi, I'm Misha, and welcome to Vibrant Classroom, where I share stories on how to create, speak, and be vibrantly. So, whether you want to speak with more confidence, charisma, and clarity, whether you want to create with more fun and flow, or whether you just want to live more freely and fluidly and fully, you've come to the right place. So here I share stories about kind of my own path in all of these kind of different areas, and they all kind of bleed one into the other. So today I wanted to talk about the magic of mountainscapes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you might notice that I am wearing a very bright, colorful toucan shirt, and I think actually toucans might live along the cliffside, so it's not too far off in a certain way. But in this particular tale, I actually went on a trip last year to Patagonia, so it's a very different ecosystem. But I wanted to share kind of what I've learned about this type of ecosystem and what it can teach us about living what I like to think of as more with more inspiration and more interconnectedness. So, as a bit of backstory into kind of why this journey was so meaningful for me, again, if you're watching on YouTube, I love bright colors. I love expansion. I'm kind of a more is more type of person. And I really like things that are kind of soft, but also bright, vibrant, colorful. And if you've ever been to Patagonia, or if you've kind of just seen photos, it's kind of the opposite. Instead of soft, it's kind of harsh and rugged, and very hard. And instead of vibrant, bright colors that are more tropical, it's much more muted, much more understated, much more rustic. But I really learned a lot on this trip. So it's really funny because I really do believe in my experience as I've begun to live with more and more authenticity. My life has moved into a greater sense of synchronicity. And people throw the expression around everything happens for a reason, but I really do think as you start to be more yourself and live more truly, you start to attract more the types of things that you really want to come into your life. And sometimes it's uncomfortable and you don't understand why it's happening, but ultimately, if you kind of follow your intuition, it leads somewhere. And that is exactly what happened on this trip. So I planned this trip with a friend, and my friend was much more excited about going to Patagonia than I was. I do love hiking. I do love the mountains. I do love the trees. But it wasn't something that was kind of, that I had been really thinking about so intensely for a long period of time. But somehow I found myself there, and it became apparent to me from the beginning that there was some kind of greater thing at work, and there was something that it was meant to teach me. So, as I sort of started to mention, Patagonia is not necessarily my cup of tea. I do love the nature. I do love being in fresh air. But it was kind of a harsh environment. So. We particularly were in El Calafate and El Chalten, which is in the state of Santa Cruz in Argentina. And it was early spring there, so essentially it was winter. And it's very intense because either when you're on the plains and the lake, it's very flat, but the winds are very harsh, and they're really the winds are very intense. So it's quite cold there, even though it's early spring. But even though it's really cold, the sun is really intense and it beats down on you. And I think there's actually a hole in the ozone. So you need to really prepare yourself for both the sun, but also for it to be very cold. And then you get into the mountains, and because it was early spring, there was still a lot of snow there. So, kind of a very harsh, unforgiving environment that initially I was not really a fan of. But as I said, I kind of sensed that there was a greater force at work and something for me to learn there, and I started to appreciate it bit by bit. And what I found out is, I began to appreciate there's a very specific type of person who can survive in this environment. And what I really understood is kind of the beauty that is the grit of survival, kind of the type of hardiness that you need to develop to deal with kind of the very intense elements there, and to kind of find an insulation within yourself from the heat, from the wind, from the cold. And this is something that I've often struggled with. So I said I really like bright things and soft things. Bright and soft things are not necessarily very abrasive or threatening. It's all very kind of gentle. So if that's kind of what you're drawing to you, when something kind of more harsh comes up, you might not be prepared for it. And I live in Buenos Aires right now. If you've ever been to Buenos Aires, the people there are fabulous. It's known for being a city of divas, and that's why I live here. I live for the divas. But sometimes it means it can be a very intense environment where people love to express themselves, and they tend to express themselves very loudly and with a lot of intensity at you. And it's something that I have very much struggled with. And Patagonia, it still has some of the diva culture, but the divas are more the landscape there. So you have the intense mountain slopes and the snow and the wind and the sun. And I really started to appreciate that. And I saw how, the ecosystem was really adapting itself that way. So I saw the conifers, I saw the pines, and how after this I read a little bit more about kind of the ecosystem. And pine needles actually and pine trees have evolved in a way that they can live in these types of environments. So the needles actually, the shape allows them to retain moisture more than kind of an open leaf would. Also, the pine trees, their branches point downward so that the snow slides right off them. So the pine trees are able to retain what's good, retain the heat, retain the moisture, and let the intense elements kind of just brush off them. And that's something that I realized I really needed to learn for myself, to be able to kind of live more freely and fully in the world. So that way they didn't need to be afraid of the elements. And also there's kind of the mountainscapes themselves. So the mountains, very steep, very hard, very rocky. And they seem very imposing, but actually they're a really important ecological function. Mountains are one of the world's greatest sources of freshwater reserves, and because of that, they also are one of the greatest places of biodiversity. So really, the mountains, while they appear harsh, them having this very strong backbone allows them to then create a nurturing, cradling environment for all of these plant and animal life around. So I really began to appreciate, if I'm able to filter things like the conifers, take what's good, let the rest pass through me, if I'm able to have kind of more of a strong backbone, I'm able to then nurture other people. And all of these together makes you more able to kind of participate in a community in a way that's kind of enjoyable for you, so that whatever comes, so that you can do it in a more fluid way. You don't have to be afraid of kind of something that someone might say as much, because you're able to kind of take the meaningful part of that and let the rest pass through you. And you're able to kind of just be in relationship in a more fluid and harmonic way. And then finally, in terms of the colors, I still do love the bright tropical colors, but I will say something that I appreciated about kind of these more rich, deeper colors. You have kind of these rich russet tones of the soil. You have kind of these deep greens of the evergreens. These are kind of colors that maybe aren't bright, but they're lasting. They've kind of, just like the environment they're in, they withstood the test of time. They've withstood kind of millennia of erosion from the winds, from the sun, and they're still there. So these colors might not be as bright as the spring colors that have kind of the vibrant dance of the seasons. And another thing about the word vibrant, within the word vibrant, there's the idea of vibration, and this kind of hum and this buzzing in it, and a sense of excitement. So that's kind of very much spring-like, very kind of ephemeral. And within the ecosystem of Patagonia, it's kind of the opposite. So the colors are deeper. They're unexcitable because they've been around for so long. So they, instead of being moved so much by the ups and downs of the seasons, instead they have a richness and a longevity that allows them to be there for longer and gives them a sense of constancy that then is a wonderful backdrop for the dance of spring. So essentially in Patagonia, what I found is really kind of a strong foundation that then allows me, or whoever learns the lesson of Patagonia, to have kind of the backbone that you need, so that then you can come into the world with a sense of openness. It's not, of course, it's not to say that deep colors and rich colors are better. It's not saying that harshness is a good thing. In fact, it's not about harshness at all. It's about kind of having a sense, having a center, having a sense of what is true that then guides you through life. Another thing that I found really another moment of synchronicity for me is, as I was writing about this, because this is actually part of a recent blog post that I wrote, I was also reading The Two Towers again. I love Tolkien. I love Lord of the Rings. And in thinking about my own moment and in my own sort of underworld in the mountains that initially seemed kind of bleak and unforgiving, I was reading about Samwise Gamgee in The Two Towers when he, if you've seen the movies, this happens in the third movie, but it's in the second book. This is the part where he passes, they're called the Mountains of Shadow. That's where Shelob's lair is. And she's this big spider, this force of darkness. Tolkien called it unlight, which is sort of an anti-light. Little bit of Tolkien history for you. But essentially, it was a moment when his master was incapacitated by Shelob's venom, and he was all alone in the middle of kind of this rugged wilderness. And it was much more hostile than my environment because I wasn't all alone and I didn't have all the forces of evil against me. But it was another moment where he found himself alone, and in that moment he needed to look internally and find his own sense of truth, figure out which way to go forward, and being able to rely on himself and his sense of center. And in that moment he found kind of this inner light, which in this case was the light of Erendil, which was kind of, if you saw the movie, that's kind of that file, that crystal file that had that beautiful light inside of it. And it really shows, how in these moments of darkness we find light, and in these moments where we find a sense of backbone, we can create more softness. And here we see kind of the natural complements of the universe, the yin and the yang, and kind of the more fluid and the more structured, how they're all there in order to be interdependent and support each other. Well, those are my musings on the majesty and really the magic of Mountainscapes, and how this really this macrocosm, if you will, really allows you, once you learn kind of the lessons of that, it can really allow you to live a more, as I said, inspiring and interconnected life. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to talk about here, please let me know. And stay tuned for more reflections on their journey to create, speak, and be vibrantly. Take good care.